All right, everybody. So our guest today, a good long-term friend of mine, an expert when it comes to estate planning, long-term care planning. He wrote a book called Accidental Safari, a guide for navigating the challenges that come along with aging. Mr. Richard Tizzano is an attorney here locally. He's a good friend of mine, somebody I get to have the privilege of having breakfast with. And I just was thinking this morning how fortunate I am, Richard, that this friendship has developed over the years. So thank you for being a guest this morning, for being here this morning.
Oh, you're very welcome, and it's a privilege to be your friend. You're a little bit younger than I am, and I counted a privilege to be connected with a guy who is very forethought or looking forward and being able to kind of interpret what's going on around and anticipate things. And so whenever I get the chance, I tell people that that's the kind of guy you are and they should connect with you.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. So I wanted to share with you a little bit. There was, this morning I woke up and I went jogging about a little bit after 5 o'clock this morning. And as I walked out of my house, I looked up and the sky was clear and there were just these beautiful stars. And I was like, this is amazing. So I pulled out my, like you do when you see something amazing, you're like, I got to capture this forever. I pulled out my camera, I held it up to the sky and I hit the button and the camera was kind of glitching out on me because there's, all I could see was black. And I just had this aha moment this morning, Richard. I thought to myself, and it's the reason I wanted to share that verse this morning. I thought, if you're a really skilled photographer, you know how to adjust the aperture and the shutter speed to allow more light in. Because when I took the picture of the sky, it just came back black. It didn't capture any of the stars, right? And then I started thinking to myself, in life, how do you live a more light-filled life? And then I was reminded of this verse. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And I thought, boy, isn't that something that there's instructions? There's a way to allow more light into our life. There's a way to allow more light into the camera to capture the stars if you know what you're doing. And there's also a way to be able to add more light into your life. This is what Jesus is capable of doing. Anyways, I just wanted to share that with you as my aha moment this morning. Really not anything relevant, but hopefully we can be light to our listeners as we talk about a hard subject, which is we're going to talk about long-term care planning. And I was hoping you could start out with your story, a little bit of background about how this became such a core component of your practice.
Sure. I tell the story in the book, The Accidental Safari, and it tells my journey. When I was just 12 years old, my mom had a stroke. I was an only child, and she went off to the hospital and was paralyzed on the right side. Came back a few months later, and so my dad and I, we cared for her over the coming years, and she was in a wheelchair about another 20 years before she passed away. But it was just a whole new life. It was, you could liken it into being on a safari that you didn't plan on going on, and you woke up one day and suddenly, life is different. And you fast forward that 40 years, and I'm an attorney, and I'm doing estate planning, and my dad has some issues, and he's in his mid-80s, and he needs to go into a nursing home, and so that happened, and all that comes with it happened, and how do you pay for that? That's a big issue, and I realized I didn't have a clue. And so this was, over 20 years ago or so, and the information was certainly not as available as it is now, and it was difficult to figure it out. And so here I was, an estate planning attorney, and I didn't even help people consider that part of their lives, what would happen as they aged, and all of a sudden they found themselves needing the things they needed as a baby, somebody to hold them and feed them and change their diaper and put them to bed, and how do you pay for all that, and how does that work, and what are the options? And so I began to incorporate those things into my practice, and began to get known for that, I guess, as somebody to go to if somebody you love is heading down on that safari. And frankly, my practice became a little depressing at the time. It was one emergency.
Remember, we're to be the light here this morning, Richard.
And so I thought, well, gee, this...
Point to the light, at least.
How much longer can I do this? And so I began to see if I could just get people to come in and see me sooner, they could address the issues, or they could be prepared, or position themselves, and they would realize, or they could recognize that the light at the end of the tunnel really is a train, and maybe I can step off the tracks here. And so I couldn't figure out how to do that, how to get people in to see me sooner or to address the issues. And so I started doing seminars, and then I wrote the book and published a magazine. And so all of those kinds of things helped with awareness. And I recognize my practice has changed. Now it's a lot more fun because I'm helping people plan. And the number of crises seems to be down. I don't know if I'm just imagining that, or probably there's a lot more attorneys who begin to practice that area of law now that there's the gray tsunami of baby boomers.
There's a great need. Yeah. Well, thank you for writing that book, The Accidental Safari. I know that it made it to #1 on Amazon for a short period of time there. And I know that you've been given some speaking opportunities to speak around the country on this topic. So this is cool that you're right here, my neighbor and a friend, and I get to have you in the studio to talk about this important subject. So let's talk about what is long-term care planning.
So it's recognizing and incorporating that things are going to change, and typically as we age, they don't always change, or they typically don't change for the better. I hear all the time how it's how tough it is to get older, and so it happens. I did have a client say, though, he wanted to die young at an old age, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And I see people
die young at an old age. I like that.
And so, and I read something recently. I'm sure you've heard it. That how old would you be if you didn't know when you were born? And so, how old do you think you are, just based on what you do in your life and how you look at life? And so that's a cool thought. But I see people all the time, and some people I see, and they're a lot older than me, and they're doing great. And I think, oh, that would be cool. And then I see people my age or younger who are really struggling physically, and I think, oh man, that could be me. Or you hear somebody, who's who you've known, and they're your age or about your age, and they've died suddenly, and I have the thought, gee, I'm old enough to be dead. and so those things, it's just life happening, right? And so long-term care planning is realizing that someday I might find myself on the safari, and are there some things I could do to prepare myself? And if you liken it to a real safari, you're not just going to go down to the airport, jump on a plane to Nairobi, and then when you get off the plane in Nairobi, try to figure out, where are the elephants, or you just don't do that. You plan ahead. And so, and when you plan ahead, you probably get a lot better deal, and you can see the things you want to see, and you can be much more intentional. And that's basically really what it's about. If you're doing an estate plan, the estate plan needs to include what would happen if you grew old at an old age, or not a young. The issues hit you younger, and how would you want those addressed? And so it's the opportunity to do some planning that's going to make a difference.
Yeah. I was just talking to a good friend of mine yesterday, and she's going through a tough spot health-wise. She's in her mid-70s, and she said, why can't I just get a new body? And so we kind of had a little bit of a conversation about that. I said, well, wouldn't it be something if you could keep all of your memories, all of your wisdom, all of life, but start with a fresh body, have 75 years of this experience, but have a 20-year-old body. And I asked her, I said, what would you do? What would, and you know what she said?
She'd stay out of the sun?
No, I'd go buy ice cream. I was like, really? 20-year body? I don't know. It's an interesting concept.
So did you say, let's go do that right now?
Yeah. I was like, well, we could do, we don't have to be 70.
I'll bring you a pint.
Okay. So we talked about this idea of long-term care, and as it relates to estate planning. So what are some of the things, because this is an area that you're walking life with people with, like you said, you're trying to get them ready so that there's less crisis management. Tell me about estate planning as it pertains to long-term care planning.
Well, I had a thought. Let me say this thought first. So you talked about, your body failing you, and you see that all the time. People in the hospital or wherever, their body's failing them. And then I had the thought, can your mind fail you? And we all know people, they have dementia or those kinds of issues, and their mind is not doing what they want their mind to do, so their mind can fail them.